Assalamualaikum everyone, hope you all will be fine. Today in this video, I will discuss about the cranial cavity. So before starting video, please subscribe my channel. So guys, cranial cavity which is also known as the intracranial space, is the space within the skull. The space inside the skull is formed by the 8 cranial bones, which are called as the neurocranium. If I discuss about its functions, it contains and protects the brain. And the word cranial cavity is derived from the Latin 𝘾𝙧𝙖𝙣𝙠. The capacity of the adult cranial cavity is about 1200 to the 1700 centimeter cube. There are 12 cranial nerves that are responsible for the controlling the cranial cavity. These nerves are responsible for providing the necessary sensory informations for the things such as smell, taste, hearing, sight, and the ability to sleep and chew is also a part of one of the things the cranial cavity is in charge of. The cranial cavity contains the brain and its surrounding meninges, the portions of cranial nerves, arteries, veins, and the venous sinuses. Now the next one is the vault of the skull. The cranial vault consists mainly of the flat bones, the paired frontal and parietal bones, the squamous parts of the temporal bones, and the interparietal part of the occipital bones. And this vault of skull is formed by the intramembranous ossifications. The internal surface of the vault shows the coronal, sagittal, and the lambdoid sutures, a shallow sagittal groove that loads the superior sagittal sinus runs in the middle line. On the each side of the groove are the several small granular pits, which loads the lateral 𝘾𝙧𝙖 and the granulations. Several narrow grooves are present for the anterior and posterior divisions of the middle meningeal vessels as they pass up the side of the skull from the foramen spinosum to the vault. In the diagram, you can see this is the vault of the skull. Now we will discuss about the base of skull. The interior of the base of skull is divided into 3 cranial fossas: the anterior, middle, and the posterior. In this diagram, you can see this is the anterior cranial fossa, this one. And this one is the middle cranial fossa, both these. And this last one is the posterior cranial fossa. All these are separated from each of other. The anterior cranial fossa is separated from the middle cranial fossa by the lesser wing of the sphenoid. In this you can see this is the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and the frontal interior cranial fossa is separated from the middle cranial fossa by the lesser wing of the sphenoid. Same like the middle cranial fossa is separated from the posterior cranial fossa by the petrous part of the temporal bone. Here, middle cranial fossa is separated from the posterior cranial fossa by the petrous part of the temporal bone. In this diagram, you can see this is the petrous part of the temporal bone. This is squamous, petromastoid, styloid process, tympanic, and the zygomatic process, this one. Now in this video, I will discuss about the anterior cranial fossa. In my other videos, I will discuss the other parts, the middle and posterior cranial fossas. So let's continue. The anterior cranial fossa is the most shallow and the superior of the 3 cranial fossas. Means this is the anterior cranial fossa and it is the superior to the, in this diagram you can see this is the superior to the all both middle and the posterior cranial fossas. and it lies superiorly over the nasal and the orbital cavities. This is the nasal cavity and these are the orbital cavities. And the fossa accommodates the antero-inferior portions of the frontal lobes of the brain. These are the antero-inferior portions of the frontal lobes of the brain. The anterior cranial fossa loads the frontal lobes of the cerebral hemispheres. It is bounded anteriorly by the inner surface of the frontal bone. This is the inner surface of the frontal bone. And its posterior boundary is the sharp lesser wing of the sphenoid. This is the sharp lesser wing of the sphenoid, which articulates laterally with the frontal bone and meets the antero-inferior angle. This is the lateral side and antero-inferior angle. And the middle end of the lesser wing of the sphenoid forms the anteroclinoid process. Here, you can see this is the anteroclinoid process. The median part of the anterior cranial fossa is limited posteriorly by the groove for the optic chiasm. The ridged orbital plates of the frontal bone forms the lateral floor of the fossa, and the cerebriform plate of the ethmoid forms the floor medially. In this diagram, you can see this is the ethmoid. The 𝘾𝙧𝙖𝙬𝙬 is the sharp upward projections of the ethmoid bone in the middle line for the attachment of the falx cerebri. Here you can see this is the 𝘾𝙧𝙬𝙬 of the ethmoid bone. This one. Alongside the 𝘾𝙧𝙬𝙬 is a narrow slit in the cerebriform plate for the passage of the anterior ethmoidal nerves into the nasal cavities. In this diagram you can see this is the ethmoidal and it is divided into the three parts: the posterior ethmoidal and the inferior and the anterior. So this is the anterior ethmoidal portion. Into the nasal cavities, it allows the passage of the anterior ethmoidal nerves. The upper surface of the cerebroform plate supports the olfactory bulbs. In this diagram you can see this is the olfactory bulb and this is the cerebriform plate. And the small perforations in the cerebriform plate permits the passage of the olfactory nerves. All this olfactory bulb, this, and olfactory tract, this is the, and these are the olfactory nerves. All this which I have discussed is the anterior cranial fossa. Hope you will enjoy this video. If you have any questions, please write in the comment sections. Thank you.